Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Today we are joined by Senator Rich Madaleno, Democratic candidate for governor in the state of Maryland. Thank you, Senator Madaleno, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Shannon, for having us.
No problem. So I'm Shannon Coleman Siciliano, co-executive director with Strong Schools Maryland. Strong Schools Maryland is a statewide organization. We are a 501c3. And our mission is to ensure that all of Maryland public school students have a world-class education. And so over the series of the next week and a half, we are meeting with gubernatorial candidates for governor here in Maryland. And we do not support a particular party or particular candidate, but our support is around education and around the Kirwan recommendations. And so we believe that whichever candidate is strongest in education will win the election. So there's no pressure here with our interview, but we'll go ahead and jump in.
Did you invite Governor Hogan?
Yes, so we did invite Governor Hogan. We have not yet heard back from his staff. Yeah, his staff. It's also worth noting that Senator Rich Madaleno also serves as a member of the Kirwan Commission, and so the questions that we're asking all of the candidates will be the same, although the conversation here today may be a little different because of your experience as part of the commission. So to jump right in, we're going to focus on policy first, because policy, as the Kirwan Commission states, that policy and what we're doing for our students is just as important as how much we're spending on education for students.
Probably even more so than what we're spending.
Right, and so thinking about policy, starting, let's think broadly around the Maryland State Constitution. Which says that students should have we should provide students a thorough and efficient system of public education to ensure that all students meet state standards. And so what does that mean to you?
Well, it means that the state has a very important role in making sure that every child, regardless of where they live in the state, has the same opportunity to get a hopefully great education that sets them up for a lifetime of success. Okay. But it's making sure that that equal opportunity exists across the state for all young people, regardless of district, regardless of zip code, regardless of school within a district.
Okay, and so do you think, in your opinion, that we are meeting that goal today?
I would say it's very unequal across the board. There are great schools in every jurisdiction. There are phenomenal students that come out from every jurisdiction. Our state traditionally gets very high marks from organizations that look at these issues as to our work to level the funding for everyone, to make sure, to equalize the funding for everyone, to make sure that jurisdictions with lower wealth have additional state resources to mitigate that disparity. So we've taken huge steps in Maryland. We have an incredibly strong foundation compared to many other states because we only have 24 school districts. We have the third fewest number of school districts. If you look to our north, Pennsylvania has more than 500 school districts. Ohio has more than 500 school districts. Trying to equalize the resources amongst 24 is much easier than 500. So we have a strong start at it. We have a history at it that goes back really to the 1970s. Coincidentally, Ben Cardin, who's running for re-election as a U.S. Senator, as the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee in the Maryland House of Delegates, he played a critical role in establishing this whole approach to shared resources at the state level. So we've done a lot of good. Clearly, we still have a lot of ways to go because we can see the outcome has not been raised for all school systems, for all students. So there's challenges between jurisdictions, and then obviously there's disparities between schools within a jurisdiction and student outcomes within schools.
Right, exactly. Okay, and so as a member of the Kirwan Commission, you understand that all of the policy recommendations that you and the commission have put forth, that they're all interrelated. So I think it's different as a member of the commission and then as a potential future governor. You know, what does that mean as a future governor to ensure that all of the policies are interrelated? And
well, Shannon, it was my service on the Kirwan Commission and my service on a national study group that looked at lessons from abroad. What are the lessons from other highly performing, successful school systems around the world that should be informing the U.S.? It was 20 legislators from 20 different states, 10 Republicans, 10 Democrats, who looked at these systems all over the world. That then was the follow-up, because we've used some of the same consultants. We brought them to Maryland to be part of the Kirwan Commission. It's the whole reason why I'm running for governor. It's the whole idea of this is such an enormous opportunity for us. This would be transformative to individual students' lives, to our communities, and to our state's economy in the long term, that I decided it was worth this risk of running for governor to try to make sure this gets done and gets done right. Because, believe it or not, our constitutional system in Maryland gives us the most powerful governor in the country. Our governor has the broadest executive budget authority in the country. If the governor doesn't put the money in the budget, the legislature can't add to the budget. We can pass formulas that, of course, the governor can veto. The governor appoints the state school board, which appoints the superintendent. The governor appoints several of the local school boards. The governor has an enormous role in policy on education. And it's the executive branch of the government that does all the regulations. The legislature can hold hearings on them, but all the legislature can do, the only way to overturn them is to pass a bill to override them that, of course, a governor can veto. With that much authority, we have almost unique amongst the states a governor who can lead on public education and have our state be both a model for the rest of the country as well as a model for what we could achieve for so many young people in our state. So it's just, to me, it's this incredible opportunity of I'm so invested in the recommendations. I think they're so important. Even though we're not done, what we've gone so far and where I think we're going, that I wanted to sort of gamble my political career on the whole idea of being there to get it done and get it done right. Because the only way we're going to be able to make this sort of investment and these sorts of changes, if you don't, is if you have a governor who is going to be a cheerleader for an advocate for these recommendations, who's going to arm twist
and make sure
control, push to get it done, to get the people on the school board, to get the money in the budget.
So I completely, can sense and I understand your commitment to the policy recommendations. But thinking of the recommendations, so we're done. But which ones give you pause? If you think of substance or potential financial implications, which ones make you think, it either we need to think about that a little differently, or which ones?
Well, I don't think any of them give me pause, as in I think they're not the right way to go. I think there are some that I think, okay, this is really going to take a lot of explaining to people, a lot of pulling in different stakeholders beyond just teachers and parents, but a much wider part of the community. A lot of it is, some of these things are going to take a generation to see the impact. So it's going to be a lot of saying, trust me to people that we got to make these changes.
If you had to choose one area, which one, and a specific example?
One of the building blocks that are part of the recommendations, the way that we are going to, I think, fundamentally change the way teachers are trained, what teacher education programs look like, how then those teachers, those education students move into becoming educators, how they get the ongoing supports, and how we transition people's expectations about what an educator's day looks like. Trying to say teaching is a profession. Teaching is a critical profession, one that takes a lot of skill when you look at successful school systems around the world, they treat their teachers very differently, not just in the way that they reward them financially, but in the way their days are structured. And trying to say to people, and it's a little counterintuitive to an American thinking, that actually you will have better teachers and better educational outcomes if teachers spend less time during the day in front of students. That when you look at these other countries across the board, and yes, I'm talking about Finland, I'm talking about Poland, Germany, I'm talking about Singapore, Shanghai, but I'm also talking about the Canadian provinces of Ontario and Alberta. Not that foreign. I mean, you can say Metro Toronto looks a lot like Metro Baltimore or many parts of Maryland. They spend less time during their day actually in front of students and more time working with other teachers, preparing for the lessons, professional development, working one-on-one with students who need that additional help. But as a result, they are stronger classroom teachers. And it's trying to then alter, because you have a whole bureaucracy that's been built up around training teachers. We have a system that says we're going to train a lot of people to be teachers because we know we're going to churn through a lot of them and only a few are going to survive into a career. That's not a good investment of money, but that is changing a lot of thinking. And taking on kind of funding, taking on the structure of schools, and then taking on the higher education establishment, all at the same time. Those are, I think, a tall order, but something I relish the opportunity to do because we get this right, and we can. It will transform our public schools.
And so I'm going to shift to look specifically at equity. And you shared some of the gaps that exist in how our students are performing and outcomes that we see. And, across the state, no matter where students are from, we could look at our national benchmarks and international benchmarks. Nationally, Maryland students are performing in the middle of the pack. If you look internationally, U.S. students are performing, also in the middle of the pack. So with that, all of Maryland students could be doing better. We could be educating our students in a better way. But then if you look specifically and you drill down school by school, district by district, as you mentioned, there are huge disparities and we are leaving students behind in regards to our Black and Brown students, students with disabilities, students with English as their second language, and students living in poverty. And so I know you're a member of the Curran Commission, and I just want to get your sense of, how is the Curran Commission thinking about addressing those inequities specifically? And I would say if you could share more about the supports beyond just concentrations of poverty, because we tend to think about that often and it's important, but how do you think the Commission's looking at the other?
I think we're looking at it from a holistic standpoint. That it's clearly, you can't expect there to be even the best teacher to be a magical human being who can come in and somehow correct all the other challenges a student has in their life, right? So you that's where you realize we've got to look, and that's the beauty of the recommendations and of the building blocks. You have to start very early. You have to start, with a child as an infant. You have to make sure they get good health care, that they are not falling behind from a health standpoint or from an intellectual development standpoint in the early years. So it's investing there. It's creating, somehow getting the services to make sure families are connected with the school system much earlier than we currently have, because we know so much about brain development, and that so much of the brain development occurs before they enter in school. Well, if we want to correct the outcome on the end, we have to invest money on that front end. So a lot of it is looking at what are the resources that are necessary for families, for students, so that they arrive at school, whenever that is, pre-K, 3K, whenever that is, that they are coming healthy and ready to learn, at an appropriate development age, and not having fallen behind, because that gap just continues to widen if you don't address it very early and then sustain it. We are looking at how you continue with the services that children, families, and communities need that address the barriers that those children have to academic performance. If a student has no access or limited access to healthy food at home or healthy living conditions at home, it's hard to imagine they're going to wind up at school, the best facility, the best school, and still perform like their other students. So it's making sure that we're trying to deal with a student and their family and a community in a more complete way. So part of it is an investment in the social services. In some ways, it's bringing the social services into the schools and recognizing, and this is what many of these other countries are doing, recognizing that you've got to pull it all together because it all fits.
Right, and I know specifically, community schools, that's something that the Curran Commission has, you've included in the report as a support.
And that's one of the, when done well, that's one of the things that a community school helps with, is making sure you've got those additional services, that social worker in the building or social workers in the building who are engaging not only with the student and their needs, but the family's needs, to recognizing that, parents who are unemployed, parents who are having financial distress at home, it's hard to keep the child going. So it's focusing on those additional services so that when a student is in a school building, they are now focused on learning. And the teacher, because the student is getting these other needs addressed, the teacher is no longer the social worker, the nutritionist, the counselor,
they can
all of those things. The teacher now can teach. And this is the magical thing that happens in other countries. When you have a student who's in a classroom ready to learn and a teacher who is now able to teach, something magical happens. They learn. And that's kind of that's what we want to get to. But it's that, from an equity standpoint, it's putting those funds in, it's putting those programs in place, and making sure that all young people across the state have the ability to access it. We know so much about poor housing and its impact on equity and on performance. So there are so many different components to this.
And so I'm going to focus now to funding. And so we don't know the exact numbers. You guys the commission is working on it currently. So we don't know the exact numbers or the price tag with the policy recommendations. But the APA study did say that as it currently stands, we need an additional $2.9 billion to educate Maryland students. So as governor, how would you go about ensuring that we are funding and at the levels we need to fund education?
And for a little bit of context and historical perspective, when the Thornton Commission reforms, the initial commission that recommended our current structure, when they went into play, when they were adopted in the 2002 session, the commission recommended and the legislature adopted a 6-year phase-in. No one expects that suddenly you can increase funding by $2 billion, $3 billion in a year. I'm sure we will recommend a 6 to 8 year phase-in to step up the increases over time. So it is doable because we've taken the first step this year in the legislature. We put aside $200 million to start to have next year as the starting point. So we'll walk into the next fiscal year with a bump, already a cushion to be able to put on. The voters will have a chance in November to weigh in on a constitutional amendment that would help redirect some of the casino revenue money. It kind of
Right.
it says let's take that money, and which is built into the education budget now,
Right.
but sort of use it to increase the amount. So
Right.
you've got big chunks there. We have a growing economy. You have additional revenue every year.
Okay.
There are a variety of ways to get us there. I think over a 6 to 8 year time frame, that 2.2 billion to the state, $1 billion
Right.
from the local governments, and
Right.
that is something that we can and should get to.
Okay. And so around revenue, are there, I know it's early, you may not be able to commit, but even over a 6-year period, you know, additional revenue will probably have to be raised. So are there any ideas that, you know, you're proposing or floating around to make sure that we do get to that 2.9 billion?
Sure. As a legislator over the last several years, I've been pushing for the legalization of recreational marijuana with the whole idea of that's regulate it and tax it like we do alcohol at the
Okay.
same rate that we do alcohol, which is a 9% sales tax in it. And
Okay.
then let's take that money and direct it specifically towards educational programs, specifically in the communities that have been most hurt by the failed war on drugs. Let's put it back into community schools in those zip codes that have had the highest rates of arrest, the highest rates of incarceration, and try to change the outcomes and direct the money that way. So that would be one pool of money. I
Okay.
have been a vocal advocate. I've worked with the retailers in state to say we have to close this loophole that allows out-of-state online retailers to avoid collecting our sales tax. Many states are engaged in this. The state of South Dakota, a rabidly conservative Republican state, has a case before the Supreme Court to allow them to do and clarify that they can actually put their sales tax on everything that's sold online.
Interesting.
So, and our state is one of the states that is supporting South Dakota. That issue alone could bring in, the estimates now, $300 to $400 million a year. And it's one of the reasons why our sales tax revenue in the state, which is our second largest revenue source and roughly accounts for a quarter of our revenues, has been completely underperforming because the retail world is so changing
Right.
because
And
of
so many people
online.
are
Right.
buying online.
And you know, part of it is you know, we shouldn't have a tax system that makes it unfair to businesses that are located in Maryland,
Right.
that they can be undersold by someone because of their ability to avoid taxes out of state. But it's also the fairness of keeping our whole public sector
Right.
moving.
Okay.
So those are two things. My name is already on there that I've already been leading on.
Okay, great. And so in wrapping up, you know, we just want to allow you time to share with Strong Schools Maryland members and those that are tuning in, you know, share what your vision for public education is for the students of Maryland and how would it be different should you become governor?
Sure, and we have 2 hours for this segment.
No,
Is
so
that
you have
the-
about
the-
2 minutes.
Oh, okay. Just want to be clear.
Yeah.
So, first and foremost, how it would be different than our current governor, it would be I would be.
And just to clarify, just different outcomes as it currently exists.
Oh,
Not
okay,
necessarily
okay.
because of a.
I mean,
person
because
involved.
part of it is I think you have to have someone who is first and foremost a supporter, cheerleader of public schools, someone who wants to see this get done, and is going to make it priority number one. Who really, you know, I'm sure every Democrat is coming in saying, "I want to be the education governor."
Right.
I don't think anyone has the background I have in getting to do it. We have to develop a system that provides a pathway for every student to succeed to the best of their abilities, to give them a vision for what the rest of their life will be, and skills that will allow them to pursue those dreams wherever those dreams take them,
Right.
and pathways to figure out how I'm going to be able to support myself, my family, and follow my dreams. One where no matter where you grow up, that your opportunities are not limited. sadly in this country, where you grow up, your economic circumstance is most likely to be a sign of where you're going to wind up as an adult. And clearly the numbers show that for white families, the chances are the quartile you're in is the quartile you're going to stay in. For black females, that holds true mostly. For black males, it's amazing to see the downward, no matter what, even if you grew up wealthy, your chances of staying wealthy don't match white males. We have to be able to resolve those things, and a strong public education system, to me, is the best thing to do that.
And I completely agree. Just in about a minute or two max, but if you can provide, at the end of your 4-year term, should you become governor, what will specifically be different for our students? And what would you be able to point to as, because I was governor, X, Y, and Z happened?
You will see a huge advancement in the access to pre-K programs. You will see the first components of Kerwin, which I think are going to be enhanced, especially early grade tutoring, to make sure young people are not falling behind on reading and math. Hopkins is doing some incredible work. It's bringing in those small group individual tutors, whatever we see shows the best practices to inform our decisions. So I think something to make sure those early grade takeoff is much stronger. And then on the tail end, much stronger career and technology education opportunities for all young people. Not tracking, but the goal of Kerwin is academically, you should be ready to succeed by the end of 10th grade to go on to college, so that by the time you start leaving high school, you are walking away with an associate's degree, you're walking away with college credit, you're walking away with a job certification, and maybe all of those things, so that you are career and college ready the moment you leave high school. A high school diploma has to be more than just an attendance certificate. It has to mean something valuable for moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much for
Thank
all
you,
of your
Shannon.
time. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like any more information, I invite you to visit our website at www.strongschoolsmaryland.org. Thank you once again.
Thank you.